Welcome to Under the Hat, a heartwarming tale of love, deception, and redemption set in the charming town of Meadow Creek. When wealthy businessman Ricardo Patterson disguises himself as a simple farm caretaker to evaluate his inheritance, he never expects to fall in love with the honest shopkeeper Lorena Miller and the community she cherishes. Before we begin this story, comment below where you're watching us from. The morning sun peeked through the worn curtains of Lorena Miller's small kitchen. At 28, she moved with the efficiency of someone who had been taking care of others for far too long. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her face, though pretty, rarely wore makeup these days. "Grandpa, your medicine is on the table," she called out while arranging fresh bread on a display tray. "Don't forget to take it with food this time." Harold Miller, once the strongest man in Meadow Creek, now sat in his armchair, his hands slightly trembling as he reached for the small pill container. "I won't forget, sweetheart. You remind me enough." Lorena smiled at her grandfather. After her mother's death 2 years ago, he was all the family she had left. His heart condition had worsened, forcing her to transform the front part of their modest home into a small grocery store just to make ends meet. The bell above the door jingled, announcing the first customer of the day. "Morning, Lorena," said Martha Jenkins, the town's postmistress. "Heard the news?" Lorena handed Martha her usual order of wheat bread. "What news?" "Old man Patterson passed away yesterday." Heart gave out finally. Lorena's face fell. "That's terrible. Mr. Patterson was always kind to Mom and me." Martha nodded, lowering her voice. "But that's not all. They say his grandson from the city is inheriting everything, some big-shot businessman who's never even stepped foot in Meadow Creek." "Really? What about the farm?" Lorena asked, her concern immediate. Patterson's farm was the lifeblood of their little community. It employed half the town and kept the local businesses, including her small store, afloat. Word is, he plans to sell it all. Probably to one of those big agricultural corporations. Can you imagine? All those people out of work? The bell jingled again as more customers entered, all buzzing with the same topic. By noon, the entire town was in a state of worried frenzy. The farm had been part of Meadow Creek for generations. If it closed, the town might not survive. "It's not right," said Tom Wilson, who had worked at the Patterson farm for 30 years. "That city boy doesn't understand what this place means to us." Lorena listened to everyone's concerns while feeling a knot in her stomach. She remembered too well what it was like to have your life upended by someone who didn't care about the consequences. Just like Brian, her ex-boyfriend, who had sworn he loved her, promised her the world, only for her to discover he was married with children in another town. "Trust is earned, not given," she'd told herself after that heartbreak. It had become her mantra. That evening, after closing the store, Lorena sat with her grandfather on their small porch. "Everyone's scared, Grandpa," she said, watching the sunset over the distant hills where the Patterson farm stretched out. "If that farm closes, people have been surviving in this valley for generations," Harold replied, his voice weathered but wise. "We'll find a way." "But why can't rich people see beyond money? That farm is people's livelihoods, their histories, their futures." Harold patted her hand. "Not everyone is like Brian, sweetheart. Sometimes people just don't know better." Lorena sighed. Her grandfather always knew where her mind went when she talked about trust. 300 miles away, in a sleek high-rise office, Ricardo Patterson closed his laptop with a sigh. At 30, he had already built his own tech company, multiplied his personal wealth, and earned a reputation as one of the sharpest business minds in the country. But today, none of that mattered. "I'm sorry about your grandfather, sir," his assistant said, placing a stack of papers on his desk. "The lawyers need these signed. It's about the farm property." Ricardo ran a hand through his dark hair. "The farm I've never seen." "Yes, sir, the real estate agent says it's prime land. They already have interested buyers." Ricardo picked up a framed photo on his desk, the only personal item in his otherwise minimalist office. In it, his mother stood, smiling beside an older man in front of a sprawling farmhouse. It was the only picture he had of the grandfather he'd never met. His mother had left Meadow Creek at 18, vowing never to return to the rural life that had, in her words, suffocated her dreams. She had raised Ricardo in the city, focused on education and ambition. When she died 5 years ago, any connection to his roots seemed to die with her. Now, with his grandfather gone too, Ricardo felt a strange emptiness, a connection severed before it had ever formed. "I think I'll go see it first," he said suddenly. His assistant looked surprised. "The farm? But your schedule can be rearranged." Ricardo stood up. Decision made. "But I don't want anyone to know who I am." "I don't understand." Ricardo looked out the window at the city skyline. "My whole life, people have treated me differently because of my name or my money. Just once, I want to see a place for what it really is, not for what it thinks I want to see." "So you're going undercover?" Ricardo smiled slightly. "I'm going as the new caretaker. The farm will need someone to watch over it until decisions are made, right? Why not me?" "But sir, you don't know the first thing about farming." "Then I guess I'll learn." Ricardo turned back to his desk. "Make the arrangements, but keep it quiet. As far as Meadow Creek is concerned, Ricardo Patterson is still in the city, too busy to be bothered with his inheritance." 2 days later, Ricardo drove down the winding road that led to Meadow Creek. Gone were his tailored suits and designer shoes. Instead, he wore worn jeans, a simple button-down shirt, and work boots he'd bought just for this trip. A wide-brimmed hat, what he imagined a farm caretaker might wear, completed his transformation. The town was smaller than he'd expected. One main street lined with small businesses, a park in the center, and homes spreading outward like ripples in a pond. It felt like stepping into another time. Following the directions to the farm, he first stopped in town for supplies. A small grocery store with a hand-painted sign reading Miller's Market caught his eye. The bell jingled as he pushed open the door. The store was modest but clean, with shelves neatly stocked with essentials. Behind the counter stood a young woman with kind eyes and a cautious smile. "Good morning," she said. "You must be new in town." Ricardo adjusted his hat nervously. "That obvious, huh?" "Meadow Creek isn't exactly a tourist destination." Her smile warmed slightly. "I'm Lorena Miller. This is my store." "Nice to meet you." He caught himself. "Rico, just Rico. I'm the new caretaker at the Patterson farm." At the mention of the farm, Lorena's expression changed subtly. "Oh, I didn't realize they were hiring. With Mr. Patterson passing." "It's temporary," Ricardo explained quickly. "Until the heir decides what to do with the place." Lorena nodded, her eyes growing serious. "Have you met him, the grandson?" Ricardo's heart beat faster. "No, I just got the job through an agency." "Well," she said, reaching under the counter, "welcome to Meadow Creek, even if it's just temporary." She placed a fresh apple and a small loaf of bread in a paper bag. "On the house, we take care of each other here." The simple gesture caught him off guard. In the city, everything had a price, an angle. "Thank you," he said, genuinely touched. "That's very kind." "It's what neighbors do," she replied, "and the farm is our closest neighbor." As Ricardo gathered the rest of his supplies, he couldn't help but notice how Lorena treated everyone who came into the store with genuine interest and care. She remembered people's names, asked about their families, joked with the children. No pretense, no agenda. "Staying up at the main house?" she asked as she rang up his purchases. "No, the caretaker's cottage. I'm told it's behind the main barn." "I know it. It's small but nice. Mr. Peterson's last caretaker, George, lived there for years before moving to be with his daughter last spring." Ricardo paid for his groceries, struck by how Lorena seemed to know everything about everyone. "Thanks for the help. I'm sure I'll be back. We're open every day except Sundays," she said. "And if you need anything urgent, I live right behind the store." As Ricardo turned to leave, an elderly man appeared from a back room, shuffling slowly with the help of a cane. "Grandpa, you should be resting," Lorena said, immediately moving to help him. "Can't sleep the day away," the old man replied. He noticed Ricardo and looked him up and down. "You the new man at Patterson's place?" "Yes, sir, Rico." Ricardo extended his hand. Harold shook it with a surprisingly firm grip. "Harold Miller, you got big shoes to fill, young man. George knew that farm like the back of his hand." "I'll do my best," Ricardo promised, feeling strangely like he was being measured. "Grandpa, don't intimidate him on his first day," Lorena chided gently. "He'll figure things out." "Let's hope so," Harold said, eyeing Ricardo thoughtfully. "That farm means everything to this town." Ricardo left the store with more than supplies. He left with a growing curiosity about Lorena Miller and an unexpected weight of responsibility. The people here cared deeply about his grandfather's land in a way that went beyond business or property values. Driving up to the farm, Ricardo was struck by its beauty. Rolling hills of green, orchards heavy with fruit, fields ready for harvest, and at the center, a large farmhouse that had seen better days but still stood proud against the landscape. The caretaker's cottage was indeed small but tidy. As he unpacked his few belongings, Ricardo wondered what he had gotten himself into. He knew nothing about farming. He knew nothing about being someone's employee rather than the boss. And he certainly knew nothing about living in a community where everyone seemed to know and care about each other. His phone rang, his assistant checking in. "How is it?" she asked. Ricardo looked out the window at the vast farm that was technically his. "Different," he said finally. "Very different. The investors are getting antsy. They want to know when you'll be back to sign the papers." Ricardo watched as the sun began to set over his inheritance, casting long shadows across the land that generations of Pattersons had worked. "Tell them I need more time," he said. "I need to understand what I'm selling first." What he didn't say was that he also needed to understand why the woman at the grocery store had looked at him with such genuine kindness, and why, for the first time in years, he had felt like just a person, not a bank account. That night, Ricardo slept better than he had in months. Lulled by the unfamiliar sounds of crickets and distant cattle, he dreamed of fields he'd never walked and a girl with honest eyes who didn't know his net worth. In town, Lorena closed her ledger with a sigh. The numbers weren't good. If the Patterson farm closed, her little store might not survive either. But as she checked on her sleeping grandfather, she made a silent promise. She would find a way, just like she always had. Neither Lorena nor Ricardo knew that their lives had just become intertwined in ways that would change them both forever. She who valued truth above all else, he living the biggest lie of his life, and between them, a struggling farm and a small town hanging in the balance. Ricardo woke to the sound of roosters. For a moment, he stared at the unfamiliar ceiling of the caretaker's cottage, confused by the absence of traffic noise and his phone's alarm. Then he remembered where he was. "First day on the job," he muttered, pulling himself out of bed. The morning air was crisp as he stepped onto the small porch, coffee in hand. The farm stretched. Before him, bathed in golden sunlight. It was beautiful but also intimidating. He had no idea where to begin. A pickup truck rumbled up the dirt road toward the cottage. A man in his 50s with weathered skin and strong forearms stepped out. "You must be Rico," the man said, extending a calloused hand. "I'm Frank Wilson, foreman here for the past 20 years. Ricardo shook his hand. "Nice to meet you." Frank looked him up and down skeptically. "George said they were sending someone, but you don't look much like a farmhand." Ricardo shifted uncomfortably. "I'm new to this." "No kidding," Frank chuckled. "Well, the owner's paying you, not me. Come on, I'll show you around." For the next 3 hours, Frank drove Ricardo across the property, explaining crop rotations, irrigation systems, and livestock schedules. Ricardo tried to absorb it all, asking questions that revealed his ignorance, but also his genuine interest. "So this farm supports most of the town?" Ricardo asked as they passed fields where workers were already busy. Frank nodded. "Directly employs about 30 families. Indirectly keeps the whole town going. That's why everyone's worried. About the sale. The city folks who inherit places like this never keep them running. They just see dollar signs." Frank gave him a sidelong glance. "You haven't heard anything from the grandson, have you?" Ricardo swallowed hard. "No, nothing." By noon, Ricardo's head was spinning with information. His hands were already blistered from the brief tasks Frank had shown him, and his designer work boots, while new, weren't made for actual farm work. "You'll toughen up," Frank said, not unkindly. "Meet me at the south field tomorrow at 6. We're starting the apple harvest." Left alone, Ricardo realized he'd need supplies, and maybe some proper boots. He drove back into town, parking outside Miller's Market. The store was busy with the lunch crowd. Lorena moved efficiently behind the counter, making sandwiches while chatting with customers. She looked up when he entered, offering a small but genuine smile. "The new caretaker returns," she said. "How was your first morning?" Ricardo ran a hand through his hair. "Humbling. I think Frank Wilson thinks I'm hopeless." Lorena laughed, a warm sound that somehow eased his embarrassment. "Frank thinks everyone is hopeless until they prove otherwise. He's been running that farm since before either of us was born." An older woman in line turned to look at Ricardo. "You're staying at the Patterson place? Have you heard anything about what the grandson plans to do?" Ricardo tensed. "No, ma'am, I just work there." "They say he's never even visited. What kind of person inherits his family's legacy and doesn't even come see it?" Another customer added. "A city person," someone else answered, generating knowing chuckles around the store. Ricardo felt his face grow hot. He'd never considered his absence from Meadow Creek as disrespectful until now. Lorena noticed his discomfort. "Let the man buy his lunch before you interrogate him," she said lightly, redirecting attention. "What can I get you, Rico?" "Whatever's good," he replied gratefully. While making his sandwich, Lorena gestured toward his hands. "You've got blisters? Already? First day and all?" Ricardo looked down at his reddened palms. "That obvious? I have some cream that will help," she said, reaching beneath the counter. "My mother's recipe works better than anything you can buy." She handed him a small tin. The simple kindness, offered without expectation, touched him deeply. In his world, nothing came without strings attached. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Just returning the favor," she replied. "Your farm's apples make my best pies." As the crowd thinned, Lorena's grandfather emerged from the back room. "Still here, I see," Harold commented, settling onto a stool. "Most city folks don't last a week." "Grandpa," Lorena scolded gently. "It's fine," Ricardo assured her. "I'm planning to stick around, Mr. Miller." "Call me Harold," the old man said. "And good. That place needs someone who cares." Ricardo found himself wanting to be that person, despite the temporary nature of his true purpose there. He noticed Harold wincing slightly as he shifted on the stool. "Are you all right, sir?" "Heart gives him trouble," Lorena answered, concern evident in her voice. "The medication helps, but it costs a fortune," Harold finished. "Nothing that should worry you, young man." Lorena changed the subject. "You'll need better boots if you're working with Frank, and gloves. Your city hands won't last a day picking apples." "Where can I get those?" "Henderson's Hardware down the street. Tell Sally I sent you." Ricardo finished his lunch, strangely reluctant to leave. There was something comforting about the small store. With its mismatched chairs and the faint smell of fresh bread, it felt more genuine than any of the five-star restaurants he frequented in the city. "I should get going. Thanks for the sandwich. And the cream." Lorena nodded. "See you round, Rico." Outside, Ricardo paused to look at the small tin in his hand. Such a simple gesture, but it had been a long time since someone had noticed his discomfort and tried to ease it without an agenda. The afternoon passed in a flurry of purchases, proper work boots, gloves, tools he barely knew how to use. In each store, people asked about the farm, about the absent owner, about his plans. He answered carefully, feeling increasingly guilty about his deception. Back at the cottage, Ricardo applied Lorena's cream to his blistered hands. It smelled of lavender, and something else he couldn't identify, and surprisingly it helped. His phone rang, his assistant again. "The investors raised their offer by $2 million, she informed him. "They're eager to close before harvest season. Ends. $2 million. 6 months ago he would have signed immediately. Now looking out at the farm, his farm, he felt uncertain. "Tell them I'm still considering," he said. "They're getting impatient, Ricardo." "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," he replied, not entirely truthfully. "I just need more time." He ended the call and sat on the porch steps as the sun began to set. In the distance, he could see workers heading home after a long day. People whose livelihoods depended on the decision he would eventually make. The following morning, Ricardo arrived at the south field at 6 sharp. Frank seemed surprised to see him, especially in proper work boots and gloves. "Didn't think you'd show," the foreman admitted. "I said I would," Ricardo replied. Frank handed him a basket. Let's see if you can pick apples without bruising half of them. The work was harder than anything Ricardo had ever done. By midday, his back ached, his shoulders burned, and despite the gloves, his hands were still sore. But there was also satisfaction in seeing his baskets fill with perfectly ripe apples, in working alongside people who took pride in what they did. During the lunch break, Frank sat beside him. "You're not half bad for a beginner." "Thanks," Ricardo said, surprised by how much the simple compliment meant. "Where'd you work before this?" Ricardo had prepared for this question. "Office job in the city. Got tired of staring at screens all day." Frank nodded. "A lot of that going around. Young people realizing there's more to life than pushing papers." "The work you do here, it matters," Ricardo said. "You can see the results." "Try telling that to the owner," Frank replied. "Word is he's already entertaining offers." Ricardo looked away. Maybe he just needs to understand what this place means to people. "Rich folks like that don't care about people like us," Frank said, but without bitterness, as if stating a simple fact. The comment stung more than Ricardo expected. Was that really how people saw him? Later that afternoon, Ricardo delivered some of the harvested apples to town. His last stop was Miller's Market. Lorena was stocking shelves when he entered. Her face brightened when she saw the crates of apples. "First harvest," she exclaimed. "These look perfect." "I picked some of them myself," Ricardo admitted, unreasonably proud of this small accomplishment. Lorena examined an apple. "Not bad for a city boy." Her teasing smile made his heart do a strange little jump. "Your cream helped," he said, holding up his hands. "Still sore, but better." "Mum's remedies always work." A shadow crossed her face. She knew all sorts of healing tricks. "You must miss her." Lorena nodded. "Every day. But she's still here, in the recipes she taught me, the store she started." "Is that why you stayed? For the store?" "Partly," she admitted. "Partly for Grandpa, but mostly because this is home. I tried the city once, didn't take." Ricardo helped her unload the apples. "What happened in the city?" Lorena's expression closed slightly. "Let's just say I learned some hard lessons about trusting people." Before he could ask more, Harold appeared. "Apples," the old man said with delight. "First batch of the season always tastes sweetest." "Special delivery," Ricardo said. "Thought you might want to make those pies Lorena mentioned." Harold eyed him with new interest. "You picked these yourself?" "Some of them. Frank and the others did most of the work." "Still," Harold said, "not many caretakers would bother with a personal delivery." Ricardo shrugged. "I was coming to town anyway, needed more of that cream." Lorena looked pleased. "I'll make you another batch, but it'll take until tomorrow." "I can come back," Ricardo said, perhaps too quickly. Harold glanced between them, a knowing look in his aged eyes. "Why don't you stay for dinner? Lorena makes beef stew on Wednesdays, best in the county." "Grandpa," Lorena protested. "Rico probably has plans." Ricardo, who had been planning a lonely meal in the caretaker's cottage, shook his head. "No plans, but I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense," Harold insisted. "Consider it payment for the apples." And so Ricardo found himself in the small apartment behind the store, seated at a worn wooden table that had clearly seen generations of family meals. The stew was indeed delicious, the bread freshly baked, and the company more enjoyable than any business dinner he'd ever attended. "So, Rico," Harold said as they ate, "what's your story? What brought you to farming?" Ricardo stuck close to his prepared background. "I needed a change. The city was suffocating." "I can understand that," Lorena said. "When I came back from Chicago, I felt like I could breathe again." "Were you there long?" Ricardo asked. 8 months. Long enough," she avoided his eyes. Harold changed the subject. "That farm you're taking care of, it's special. Old Patterson loved that land like it was his child." "I can see why," Ricardo said honestly. "It's beautiful." "Beautiful, yes, but it's more than that," Harold continued. "That land feeds this town, not just with food but with purpose. Everyone here is connected to it somehow." Ricardo nodded, feeling the weight of his eventual decision growing heavier. "You know," Harold said, his voice softening, "when my Maggie got sick, that's Lorena's mother. Patterson brought us food every week. Wouldn't take a penny for it. He was a good man, Lorena added. Unlike his grandson, apparently. Ricardo nearly choked on his stew. What makes you say that? Well, his grandfather dies, and he can't even be bothered to come to the funeral? Now he's just going to sell to the highest bidder without even seeing what he's giving up. The accusation hit Ricardo hard. He hadn't attended the funeral. His assistant had told him it wasn't necessary, that local management would handle it. He'd been in the middle of a major business deal and had simply agreed. Maybe he has his reasons, Ricardo said weakly. Lorena shook her head. What reason could be good enough to abandon your family legacy without even looking at it? Ricardo had no answer. After dinner, he insisted on helping with the dishes, standing beside Lorena at the small sink. Their hands occasionally brushed in the soapy water, sending an unexpected warmth through him. "Thank you for dinner," he said. "It's been a long time since I had a home-cooked meal." "Don't they feed you in the city?" she teased. "Not like this. In the city, meals were networking opportunities, business transactions. This had been simply pleasant." "Well, you're welcome any time," she said, and he believed she meant it. As he prepared to leave, Lorena handed him a small package. "Fresh bread for breakfast and more cream for your hands. You don't have to—" "Neighbors," she reminded him with a smile. Walking back to his truck, Ricardo felt conflicted. These people, Lorena, Harold, Frank, the workers, they were good people. They cared about each other, about the land, and they all despised the absent owner, him, for his apparent indifference. But was he really indifferent? Or just ignorant? He'd never known what the farm meant to the community. He'd been told it was an asset, not a lifeline. Over the next 2 weeks, Ricardo settled into a routine. Mornings with Frank and the farm workers, learning something new each day. Afternoons delivering produce to town or handling repairs around the property, and increasingly often, evenings at Miller's Market, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to talk with Lorena after she closed the store. He learned that she loved mystery novels, could name every constellation in the night sky, and hummed while she worked. He discovered that her laugh had different tones, a polite chuckle for customers, a genuine burst of joy when truly amused, and a soft, warm sound that seemed reserved for moments when it was just the two of them. Ricardo found himself sharing things too, real things about his life, carefully edited to fit his caretaker persona. He told her about growing up without a father, about his mother's determination to give him a better life, about his love of architecture, and how he'd once dreamed of designing buildings that would stand for generations. "Why didn't you?" she asked one evening as they sat on the store's back porch, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. "Life took a different turn," he said truthfully. "Practical concerns won out over dreams. It's never too late to chase a dream," she said, looking at him with those honest eyes that seemed to see right through him. In moments like that, he wanted desperately to tell her the truth. But each day that passed made the lie bigger, the potential betrayal worse. Meanwhile, the pressure from the city increased. The investors called daily now. His assistant warned that they might pull their offer if he delayed much longer. His own company needed his attention, but something was happening to Ricardo, to his heart. He looked forward to seeing Lorena's smile each day. He took pride in Frank's grudging approval. He felt a connection to the land that grew stronger with each sunrise he witnessed from the caretaker's cottage. One evening, Ricardo found Lorena sitting alone outside the store, her expression troubled. "Everything okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Grandpa's not doing well," she admitted. "The doctor wants him to try a new medication, but our insurance won't cover it." "How much is it?" "More than we can afford right now." She sighed. "The store's barely breaking even. If the farm closes," Ricardo felt a pang of guilt. "It won't." "Close," he said, with more certainty than he had a right to feel. Lorena gave him a sad smile. "You can't know that, none of us can. I just have a feeling," he insisted. "The owner would have to be heartless to sell after seeing this place. But that's just it. He hasn't seen it. And he won't." Ricardo took her hand impulsively. "Lorena." Finally, the touch of his hand seemed to startle her. For a moment they sat connected, a current of something unspoken passing between them. Then she gently pulled away. "I should check on Grandpa," she said, standing up. "Of course." Ricardo felt the loss of her hand like a physical ache. "Lorena?" She paused at the door. "If you need anything, for your grandfather, for the store, please tell me." Her eyes softened. "That's kind, Rico, but we'll manage. We always—" To that night, Ricardo made a decision. He called his assistant. "I need you to transfer $50,000 to St. Mary's Medical Center in Meadow Creek," he instructed. "It's to cover medical expenses for a Harold Miller. Make it anonymous." "Another charity donation?" his assistant asked, used to his philanthropic impulses. "No," Ricardo said firmly. "This is personal." After ending the call, he sat on the cottage porch, watching the moonlight silver the fields of his inheritance. For the first time in his life, he was starting to understand what it meant for something to be valuable beyond its price tag. And for the first time, he was falling in love with a woman who valued honesty above all else. The autumn days grew, shorter as September gave way to October. The apple harvest was in full swing, and the farm hummed with activity from dawn until dusk. Ricardo had settled into a rhythm, his city softness gradually replaced by calloused hands and sun-bronzed skin. Each day he learned more about farming, about Meadow Creek, and about himself. "You're a quick study," Frank told him one afternoon as they repaired an irrigation pipe. "Didn't think you'd last this long." Ricardo smiled, taking the comment as the high praise it was. "Thanks for giving me a chance." "Not me who gave it," Frank shrugged. "You earned it." The simple acknowledgement meant more to Ricardo than any business award he'd ever received. Here, respect wasn't given based on wealth or position. It had to be earned through honest work and reliability. Later that day, Ricardo drove into town for supplies. As had become his habit, he stopped at Miller's Market last, timing his visit for when the store was least busy. Lorena was behind the counter, tallying receipts with a furrowed brow. She looked up when he entered, her serious expression melting into a smile that never failed to quicken his pulse. "The farmer returns," she teased. "Hardly a farmer," he replied, more like Frank's not completely useless assistant. She laughed. "From Frank, that's practically a marriage proposal." Ricardo set a basket of fresh vegetables on the counter. "Thought you might want these for the store." "Thanks. The customers love farm fresh produce." She hesitated. "Rico, can I ask you something?" "Anything," he said, meaning it more than she could know. "Has there been any word about the farm? About what's going to happen to it?" The question caught him off guard, though he should have expected it. "Nothing definite," he hedged. "Why?" Lorena sighed. "People are getting nervous. Thompson's Market in Riverdale closed last month. The owner heard a rumor that Patterson Farm might sell to Midwest Agriculture, and he couldn't compete with their prices." Ricardo felt a weight settle on his shoulders. His delay in deciding the farm's fate was already affecting people's lives. "I'm sorry to hear that. It's not your fault," Lorena said. "But if the farm does sell, what will you do?" The question hit him hard. In his elaborate deception, he'd never considered what Rico would do after the sale. "I haven't thought about it," he admitted. "I've been focused on the harvest." "Would you stay in Meadow Creek?" There was something in her voice, a hint of personal interest that made his heart race. "I'd like to," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "I've found reasons to stay." The moment between them stretched, charged with unspoken feelings until the store bell jingled as Harold entered from the back apartment. "Rico," the old man greeted warmly. "Just the man I wanted to see." Ricardo turned, grateful for the interruption that prevented him from saying too much. "Harold, how are you feeling?" "Better than I have in years," Harold said. "Doc started me on a new medication. Works like a charm." "That's wonderful news," Ricardo said, genuinely pleased but avoiding Lorena's gaze. "Strange thing, though," Harold continued. "Insurance company called. Said an anonymous donor covered all my medical expenses, even my future treatments." Ricardo kept his expression neutral. "That's amazing." "It is," Lorena agreed, watching Ricardo closely. "A complete mystery." "Well, good things happen sometimes," Ricardo said, desperately trying to change the subject. "Frank mentioned the Harvest Festival is coming up next week." Harold nodded. "Biggest event of the year in Meadow Creek. Everyone comes together to celebrate the harvest. Food, music, dancing under the stars." Sounds nice, Ricardo said. You should come, Lorena suggested. Everyone will be there. Including you? Ricardo asked before he could stop himself. Including me, she confirmed with a soft smile. I make the apple pies for the contest every year. Then I wouldn't miss it, he promised. That evening, as Ricardo drove back to the farm, his phone rang. His assistant's name flashed on the screen. With a sigh, he answered. Please tell me you're coming back soon, she said without preamble. The board is getting restless. Investors are threatening to walk, and there's a pile of contracts that need your signature. I'm still figuring things out, Ricardo replied. It's been almost a month, Ricardo. What's there to figure out? It's a farm, not a tech startup. It's more complicated than I thought, he said, watching the sunset paint the fields gold and amber. This place, it matters to people. His assistant sighed audibly. You're not seriously considering keeping it, are you? The maintenance costs alone would eat into your profits. And what do you know about running a farm? I'm learning, he said quietly. Oh my God, she said. It's a girl, isn't it? Ricardo didn't answer, which was answer enough. Ricardo, be reasonable. Your life is in the city. Your company, your friends, everything. You can't just become a farmer because some country girl batted her eyelashes at you. Her words stung because they contained a kernel of truth. Could he really walk away from everything he'd built? And more importantly, would Lorena still want him when she discovered his deception? I'll make a decision after the Harvest Festival, he said finally. One way or another. Fine, his assistant relented. But the investor's final deadline is next Friday. After that, the offer is off the table. Ricardo ended the call, feeling the weight of his dual life pressing down on him. He needed to make a choice, and soon. But first, he needed to know if what was growing between him and Lorena was real and strong enough to survive the truth. The week leading up to the Harvest Festival flew by in a blur of activity. The farm's main barn was transformed into a venue for the celebration, with twinkling lights strung from the rafters and hay bales arranged for seating. Tables were set up for the food contest, and a small stage erected for the local band. Ricardo threw himself into the preparations, volunteering for every task, working alongside the townsfolk as if he'd always been one of them. But beneath his enthusiastic participation lay a growing anxiety. He knew his time as Rico was running short. The morning of the festival, Ricardo found himself helping Lorena set up her pie display. You made all these? He asked, amazed at the array of perfect golden-crusted pies. Family tradition, she explained. Mom won the contest 15 years in a row. I've managed to win the last 3. That's impressive, he said. What's your secret? Patterson Farm apples, she replied with a wink, and a splash of vanilla in the crust. Don't tell anyone. They worked side by side, falling into an easy rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Several times, Ricardo caught himself watching. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, how her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the graceful efficiency of her movements. What? She asked, catching him staring. Nothing, he said. Just happy to be here. A soft blush colored her cheeks. I'm glad you are too. As evening approached, the festival came to life. Families streamed in, children ran between hay bales, and the air filled with laughter and music. Ricardo had never experienced anything like it, a genuine community celebration without pretense or exclusivity. Harold found him by the cider stand. Quite a sight, isn't it? Been happening every year for as long as anyone can remember. It's amazing, Ricardo agreed, watching as neighbors greeted each other with genuine warmth. You know, Harold said thoughtfully, life's about choices, son. Big ones, small ones, they all matter. Ricardo looked at the older man curiously. That sounds like advice. Harold smiled. Maybe it is. I've seen the way you look at my granddaughter, and the way she looks at you when she thinks no one's watching. Ricardo's heart leaped. I care about her, Harold, more than I expected to. I can see that. But there's something else I see. Harold's eyes were kind, but perceptive. You're carrying. A weight, son, a secret maybe. Ricardo tensed. What makes you say that? Been around long enough to recognize when someone's not being completely honest, with others or themselves. Harold placed a weathered hand on Ricardo's shoulder, Whatever it is, just remember, Lorena values truth above all else. Lost her. Trust once and it nearly broke her. What happened? Ricardo asked, though he dreaded the answer. Not my story to tell, Harold replied, but I will say this. She deserves someone who's honest with her, even when it's hard. The conversation was interrupted as Lorena approached, looking radiant in a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. There you are, she said. They're about to announce the pie contest winners. As expected, Lorena won first place. The crowd cheered as she accepted the small trophy, her smile bright enough to rival the strings of lights overhead. Ricardo felt a surge of pride watching her, followed by a pang of guilt. Here was this amazing woman, and he was lying to her every day. After the awards, the band started playing and couples moved to the makeshift dance floor. Harold nudged Ricardo. Don't just stand there. Ask the girl to dance. Gathering his courage, Ricardo approached Lorena. May I have this dance? She placed her hand in his. I thought you'd never ask. Leading her to the dance floor, Ricardo pulled her gently into his arms. They swayed to the music, their bodies finding a natural harmony. I've never been much of a dancer, he admitted. You're doing fine, she assured him, moving a step closer. Under the soft lights with music floating around them, Ricardo felt as if they were in their own world. Her hand was warm in his, her eyes reflecting the twinkling lights above. Lorena, he began, his voice serious. There's something I need to... There he is! A sharp voice cut through the music. Ricardo froze. He knew that voice. A woman in an impeccable business suit was striding across the barn, her high heels incongruous on the hay-strewn floor. Behind her trailed two men in dark suits. Ricardo, thank God I found you, his assistant exclaimed, reaching them. We've been trying to reach you for hours. Lorena stiffened in his arms, confusion clouding her face. Ricardo? The assistant looked between them, suddenly realizing her mistake. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were... busy. Jessica, what are you doing here? Ricardo asked, his voice tight. Emergency at the company. The Chen deal is falling apart. We need you back in the city immediately. She glanced at Lorena, then back to Ricardo. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Mr. Patterson. The name hit the crowded barn like a thunderclap. Conversations halted, music faded, and every eye turned toward them. Lorena stepped back from Ricardo, as if burned. Patterson? She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. As in, the owner? You're Ricardo Patterson. He reached for her hand. Lorena, I can explain. She pulled away. All this time you were him? The whole time? People were gathering around them now, Frank among them, his expression darkening as he realized what was happening. You've been lying to everyone, Frank demanded, playing at being a caretaker while deciding our fates. It wasn't like that, Ricardo insisted, desperately trying to salvage the situation. I wanted to understand the farm, the community, before making any decisions. By deceiving us, Lorena's voice was hollow, by making us think you were just another worker, while all along you were the one person who could destroy everything we care about. I never intended to hurt anyone, Ricardo said, especially not you. Lorena's eyes filled with tears. If you wanted to know if you could trust us, why did you start by lying? The question struck him like a physical blow. It was the very thing she had told him she could never forgive. The harvest festival is over for me, Lorena announced quietly. She turned to leave, dignity in every line of her body despite the public humiliation. Lorena, please, Ricardo called after her. She paused but didn't turn. You know what's ironic? Rico, or whoever you are. I was starting to fall for you, the real you, I thought. Her shoulders straightened. But now I'll never know if that person even exists. With that, she walked away, the crowd parting silently to let her pass. Harold gave Ricardo one last disappointed look before following his granddaughter. Left standing in the middle of the dance floor, Ricardo faced the community he had come to care about, people who now looked at him with hurt and betrayal in their eyes. I'm sorry, he said to no one and everyone. I truly am, but sorry wasn't enough. Not for them and certainly not for Lorena. The drive back to his cottage was silent, Jessica and her colleagues following in their luxury SUV. Once inside, his assistant launched into details about the business crisis, but Ricardo barely heard. Are you even listening?" she finally demanded. "This is serious, Ricardo. The company could lose millions." "I don't care," he said, surprising himself with the truth of it. "What?" "I said I don't care." He looked out the window toward the town, where lights still burned despite the festival's abrupt ending. "There are more important things than money." Jessica stared at him. "You've changed." "Maybe I have," he acknowledged. "Or maybe I've just remembered who I wanted to be before success got in the way. So what now?" "You're going to throw away everything you've built to become a farmer because of some small-town girl?" Ricardo thought of Lorena, her kindness, her strength, her unwavering moral compass. She's not just some girl, and this isn't just some farm. This place matters. These people matter. "Even though they hate you now?" Jessica asked bluntly. The truth of that statement hit hard. In one evening, he'd lost everything that had come to matter to him over the past month. Lorena's trust, the community's acceptance, the sense of belonging he'd never felt in the city. "That's my problem to fix," he said firmly. "Now, I need you to return to the city. Tell the board I'm extending my leave of absence. They won't like it. They don't have to. It's my company and it's my decision." After his assistant left, Ricardo sat alone on the cottage porch, watching the stars and wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. He'd started this deception thinking he was just gathering information. He hadn't counted on falling in love with Lorena, with the farm, with a way of life he'd never known existed. Now he had to decide, walk away from it all and return to his old life, or stay and try to repair the damage he'd done, knowing forgiveness might never come the sea. Next morning, Ricardo drove to town with determination but little hope. Miller's Market was closed, a handwritten sign on the door simply stating family emergency. He knew it was an excuse to avoid him. For the next week, Ricardo tried everything. He sent letters of apology to everyone at the farm. He delivered fresh produce to people's homes with notes explaining his actions. He even stood outside Miller's Market for hours, hoping for a glimpse of Lorena. But the town had closed ranks. Frank and the workers did their jobs, but refused to speak to him. Beyond what was absolutely necessary, storekeepers served him with cold politeness, and Lorena remained invisible, the store now run by a cousin who treated Ricardo like a stranger. Finally, desperate for news of her, Ricardo approached Harold's friend Tom at the barber shop. "Please," Ricardo begged, "just tell me if she's okay." Tom's expression softened slightly. "She's hurt, son, embarrassed, feels like a fool for trusting you." "I never meant to hurt her," Ricardo insisted. "What I felt, what I feel for her is real." "Maybe so," Tom conceded, "but you built it on lies. That's a shaky foundation." "What can I do?" Ricardo asked. "How can I make this right?" Tom shook his head. "Some things can't be fixed with money or grand gestures. Sometimes all you can do is prove with actions, not words, that you've changed. And even then it might not be enough." Ricardo left the barbershop with a heavy heart, but a clearer mind. Tom was right. Words and apologies weren't enough. He needed to show Lorena and the community who he really was, not Ricardo Patterson, the wealthy businessman, not Rico, the fake caretaker, but the man he'd discovered within himself during his time in Meadow Creek. That evening, he made a decision. He called his lawyer. "I need you to cancel all negotiations regarding Patterson Farm," he instructed. "It's not for sale, not now, not ever." "Are you sure?" his lawyer asked. "The offers are substantial." "I'm sure," Ricardo said firmly, "and I have another project for you." Over the next days, Ricardo worked from dawn until well past dusk. He met with architects and builders. He consulted with Frank about the farm's needs. He invited local business owners to share their concerns and ideas. All without fanfare, without press, without seeking credit. 2 weeks after the Harvest Festival disaster, residents of Meadow Creek began to notice changes at the farm. The old community center, long in disrepair, was being renovated. Farm workers received unexpected raises. A scholarship fund was established for local students interested in agricultural studies. But most surprising was the transformation of the abandoned East Barn into a processing facility, allowing Patterson Farm to produce and sell its own products rather than shipping raw materials elsewhere, creating more local jobs and revenue. Through it all, Ricardo worked alongside the builders and farmers, dressed in the same work clothes he'd worn as Rico, his hands dirty, his face sunburned. Gradually, some of the workers began to nod in greeting again. Frank occasionally offered gruff advice. The ice was slowly thawing, but Lorena remained distant. Ricardo caught glimpses of her in town, but she always turned away. The one time he'd entered the store, she'd disappeared into the back room, leaving her cousin to help him. 1 month after the revelation, as Ricardo supervised the installation of new equipment in the processing facility, Frank approached him. "So you're really doing it," the foreman said, surveying the renovation. "Investing in this place instead of selling it." "It's my heritage," Ricardo replied. "I just didn't realize what that meant until recently." Frank studied him. "You're not what I expected, Patterson. Is that good or bad?" "Still deciding," Frank said, but with the hint of a smile. "But I will say this. Actions speak louder than words, and your actions lately have been noteworthy." Coming from Frank, it was high praise. "Thank you, that means a lot." Frank hesitated, then added, "She's hurting, you know. Been through this before. Trusting someone who wasn't what they seemed." "Harold mentioned something happened in Chicago," Ricardo ventured. Frank nodded. "Guy named Brian. Big shot who swept her off her feet, promised her the world. Turned out he was married with kids in the suburbs. Nearly broke her." Ricardo winced. No wonder his deception had hit her so hard. "I'm not Brian." "No," Frank agreed. "You're not, but the pain feels the same to her." As November arrived, bringing colder weather and the end of harvest season, Ricardo felt both progress and stagnation. The farm was thriving under his active management. The community was cautiously accepting his commitment to staying and investing, but the one person whose forgiveness he craved most remained beyond his reach. Then, on a crisp Saturday morning, Harold appeared at the farm office. Ricardo hadn't seen him since the festival night. "Harold," he said, rising quickly from his desk, "is everything okay? Is Lorena—" "She's fine," Harold assured him. "Stubborn, but fine." "What can I do for you?" The older man settled into a chair. "I've been watching you these past weeks. We all have." Ricardo nodded, unsure where this was heading. "You've put your money where your mouth is," Harold continued. "That processing facility will change things around here. The scholarships, the jobs, the community center, it's all good stuff." "I'm trying to make amends," Ricardo said simply. "I can see that." Harold leaned forward. "But there's one person you haven't been able to reach, isn't there?" Ricardo's heart tightened. "She won't even talk to me." "Can you blame her?" "No," Ricardo admitted. "What I did was wrong. I should have been honest from the start." Harold nodded thoughtfully. "Yet here's what I find interesting. The man she was falling for, Rico, the caretaker, was more real than the role you were playing." Ricardo frowned, confused. "Think about it," Harold continued. "When you came here, you were playing a part. But the man who worked alongside Frank, who delivered apples to our store, who danced with my granddaughter under the harvest moon, that man wasn't fake. That was the real you, wasn't it? The person you might have been if life had taken a different turn?" The insight struck Ricardo deeply. Harold was right. As Rico, stripped of his wealth and status, he'd been more authentic than he'd been in years. "I don't know how to make her see that," Ricardo said desperately. Harold stood, reaching into his pocket. "Maybe this will help." He placed a small, folded paper on the desk. "It's her delivery schedule for today. Last stop is the Peterson farm at 5. She'll be alone." Hope flared in Ricardo's chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Harold warned. "She still might slam the door in your face, but if there's one thing I know about my granddaughter, it's that under all that hurt is a heart that believes in second chances." After Harold left, Ricardo stared at the folded paper like it contained the secrets of the universe. One last chance to make things right. One last chance to tell Lorena the complete truth, not just about his identity, but about how she had changed his life forever. He had no grand plan, no practiced speech. For once in his life, Ricardo Patterson would simply speak from his heart, and hope it was enough. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the fields as Ricardo waited by the roadside leading to the Peterson farm. His truck was parked just out of sight, and he paced nervously, checking his watch every few minutes. According to Harold's note, Lorena would be making her delivery at 5 o'clock. Ricardo had changed his clothes 3 times before settling. On a simple flannel shirt and jeans, the outfit he'd worn on his first day in Meadow Creek. Not the polished businessman, not the pretend caretaker, just himself. At 4:55, he heard the rumble of an approaching vehicle. Lorena's delivery van appeared around the bend, its faded blue paint recognizable even from a distance. Ricardo's heart pounded as he stepped into view, raising a hand in greeting. The van slowed, then stopped. For a moment, he thought she might simply drive away. Instead, she rolled down her window, her expression guarded. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Waiting for you," he replied honestly. "How did you know I'd be here?" "Harold," he admitted. "He thought maybe you'd be willing to talk to me just once." Lorena sighed. "Grandpa needs to mind his own business. He cares about you, about us." "There is no us," she said flatly. "There never was. Whatever was between us was based on a lie." The words stung, but Ricardo pressed on. "I deserve that. But please just give me 5 minutes. After that, if you still never want to see me again, I'll respect your decision." She studied him for a long moment. 5 minutes, she finally agreed. "I need to make this delivery first." Ricardo nodded, relief washing through him. He waited by the roadside while she dropped off groceries at the Peterson house. When she returned, she gestured for him to get in the van. "We can talk while I drive," she said. "I have more deliveries." Ricardo climbed into the passenger seat, acutely aware of the small space they now shared. She smelled of apples and cinnamon, and the familiar scent made his heart ache. They drove in silence for a minute before he gathered his courage. "I never meant to hurt you," he began. "You never do," she replied sharply. "Men like you never mean to hurt anyone, it just happens." "That's not fair," he protested. "I'm not like Brian." Lorena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "How do you know about him?" "Frank told me a little. Enough to understand why my lie hit you so hard." She stared straight ahead at the road. "So you know my sad little story. Poor small-town girl fooled by the big city charmer." "That's not how I see you at all," Ricardo said. "You're the strongest person I've ever met. Running the store, taking care of Harold, holding the community together." A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed her face. "Flattery won't fix this, Ricardo. It's not flattery, it's the truth." He took a deep breath. "And the truth is what you deserve. The complete truth." "I'm listening," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "When I came to Meadow Creek, I had every intention of selling the farm," he admitted. "It was just another asset to me. I came undercover because I wanted to understand its value before negotiating the sale." "At least you're honest about that," she said bitterly. "But something happened that I didn't expect," he continued. "I fell in love with this place, with the land, the community, with the way people care about each other here." "And that stopped you from selling?" she asked skeptically. "No," he admitted. "What stopped me was you." Lorena glanced at him sharply. Then back at the road. "You showed me a different way of seeing the world," Ricardo explained, "where value isn't measured in dollars, but in relationships, in belonging, in creating something that lasts." "Pretty words," she said, but her voice had softened slightly. "Not just words," he insisted. "Actions. Look at what I'm doing with the farm. I'm investing in it, in the community. Not because it makes business sense, but because it's the right thing to do." "And I'm supposed to be impressed? That you're using your millions to ease your guilty conscience?" Ricardo shook his head. "I'm not asking for your approval or your forgiveness. I just want you to understand something important." They reached a scenic overlook, and Lorena unexpectedly pulled over. She turned to face him. "What?" "The man you knew as Rico, he wasn't completely fake," Ricardo said earnestly. "In many ways, he was more real than the person I'd become in the city. With you, I wasn't pretending to care or pretending to be interested in your life. Those parts were true. How am I supposed to know what parts were real and what parts were lies?" she asked. and for the first time he heard the pain beneath her anger. "That's just it," he said gently. "It all became real. The work on the farm, the friendships in town, the way I feel about you. Being Rico let me discover who I really am, beneath all the trappings of success." Lorena was silent, looking out at the view of Meadow Creek, nestled in the valley. "Below, I'm not asking you to forgive me today," Ricardo continued. "I'm just asking for a chance to prove over time that the man you are beginning to care for is the real me." The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken emotions. "You hurt me," she finally said, her voice small. "I trusted you. I let myself feel something for you." "I know," he said, resisting the urge to reach for her hand, "and I hate myself for causing you pain. I thought I was finally opening up to someone real," she continued. "Someone without an agenda, without secrets." "I started with a secret," Ricardo acknowledged, "but by the end, you knew me better than anyone ever has. The real me." Lorena turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "How can I ever trust you again?" "I don't have an easy answer," he admitted. "Trust takes time to rebuild. All I can offer is honesty from this moment forward, and the hope that someday you'll see that the man under the hat was genuine, even if the name wasn't." She turned the key in the ignition. "I need to finish my deliveries." Ricardo's heart sank. "Of course. And I need time," she added. "Time to think about everything." It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. Ricardo nodded. "Thank you for listening." They drove back to town in silence, but it felt different now. Less tense, more thoughtful. When they reached Miller's Market, Ricardo stepped out of the van. "Goodbye, Lorena." She looked at him for a long moment. "Goodbye, Ricardo." The weeks that followed were the hardest of Ricardo's life. He threw himself into work on the farm, personally overseeing the completion of the processing facility, discussing crop rotations with Frank, even helping repair equipment in the maintenance shed. Word of his efforts spread through Meadow Creek. Slowly, tentatively, the community began to thaw toward him. People nodded in greeting when he passed. Some even stopped to talk about his plans for the farm. Frank, in particular, seemed to have moved past his initial anger, treating Ricardo with a gruff respect that meant more than any praise from his corporate peers ever had. But Lorena remained distant. Ricardo caught glimpses of her in town, but she never approached him. Once their eyes met across the street, and she gave a small nod before turning away. As November turned to December, the first snow fell on Meadow Creek. Ricardo stood on the porch of the main farmhouse. He'd moved from the caretaker's cottage after his identity was revealed, watching the flakes transform the landscape into a winter wonderland. His phone rang. His assistant again. "The board is asking questions," she informed him. "They want to know when you're coming back." "I'm not," Ricardo replied. "Excuse me? I'm not coming back, Jessica. At least, not in the same capacity. I'll remain on the board, but I'm stepping down as CEO." "You can't be serious," she gasped. "Because of a farm? Because of a girl who won't even talk to you?" "Because I've found something worth more than what I had," he explained. "A place where I belong, where I can make a difference, not just make money." After ending the call, Ricardo made another decision. He drove into town to Miller's Market. Harold was behind the counter, sorting through mail. He looked up in surprise. "Ricardo, didn't expect to see you today." "Is Lorena here?" Ricardo asked. "No, she's making deliveries." Harold studied him curiously. "Something on your mind?" Ricardo nodded. "I wanted to ask your blessing." "For what?" "For what I'm planning to do at the farm. For the community." Harold raised an eyebrow. "You don't need my blessing. It's your farm." "But this is your town," Ricardo replied. "Your home. And since Lorena won't talk to me yet, you're the next best person to ask." Intrigued, Harold gestured for him to continue. Ricardo outlined his plan. He wanted to convert the main farmhouse into a community center for Meadow Creek, a place for gatherings, classes, and events. The upper floor would become a medical clinic, staffed once a week by doctors from the city, providing care for residents who couldn't travel to larger towns. The grounds would host a weekly farmers' market in the summer, giving small producers a place to sell their goods. "And where would you live?" Harold asked when he finished. The caretaker's cottage suits me. Fine, Ricardo replied. I don't need much space anymore. Harold was silent for a long moment. You've changed, son. For the better, I hope. Definitely for the better. Harold smiled slightly. I think the community would be grateful for what you're proposing. And Lorena? Ricardo couldn't help asking. Harold shrugged. That's for her to decide, but if it means anything, she asks about you sometimes. About what you're doing at the farm. Hope flickered in Ricardo's chest. She does? Don't read too much into it, Harold cautioned. She's still hurt, but she's also fair-minded. She sees the good you're trying to do. 2 days later, Ricardo held a town meeting in the newly renovated East Barn to present his plan for the farmhouse conversion. Nearly everyone in Meadow Creek attended, curious about what the once deceptive owner had in mind. Ricardo stood before them, nervous but determined. Thank you all for coming, he began. I know many of you are still angry with me for my deception. When I first arrived, I don't blame you. I betrayed your trust, and that's not easily forgiven. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But I hope my actions over the past month have begun to show you who I really am, he continued. Not Rico the caretaker, not Ricardo Patterson the businessman, but just me, a person who has come to care deeply about this community and this land. As he outlined his plans for the farmhouse, Ricardo scanned the crowd, his heart skipping when he saw Lorena standing at the back. She hadn't expected to see her there. This farm doesn't belong to just me, he concluded. It belongs to all of us, to Meadow Creek. I'm merely its caretaker, and I promise to be a good one, for as long as... You'll have me? Silence fell when he finished. Then Frank stood up. I've been working this land for 20 years, the foreman said. Old Mr. Patterson loved it, but even he didn't have vision like this. I say we give the boy a chance. A murmur of agreement spread through the barn. One by one, people stood to voice their support, to suggest additions to the plan, to offer their help with the renovation. Through it all, Lorena remained silent, watching from the back. When the meeting concluded, people gathered around Ricardo, clapping him on the back, shaking his hand. By the time he could look for her again, she was gone. The week before Christmas, work began on the farmhouse conversion. The project would take months, but Ricardo wanted to get started right away. He worked alongside the construction crew, ignoring the cold, pushing through exhaustion. One evening, as dusk fell and the workers headed home, Ricardo remained on the porch, reviewing blueprints in the fading light. He heard the crunch of footsteps on snow and looked up to see Lorena approaching, carrying a thermos. His heart nearly stopped. It was the first time she had sought him out since their conversation in her van. Harold thought you might need this, she said, holding out the thermos. Hot cider. Thank you, he replied, carefully taking it from her. Instead of leaving immediately, Lorena looked up at the farmhouse. Your plans are really impressive. Thanks, he said. I hope it will be useful for the town. It will be, she confirmed. She hesitated, then added, I've been watching what you're doing here. With the farm, with the community. Ricardo waited, hardly daring to breathe. You've surprised a lot of people, she continued, including me. In a good way, I hope, he ventured. A small smile touched her lips. Yes, in a good way. They stood in silence for a moment, the cold air turning their breath to mist. I should go, she finally said. Harold is waiting for me. Of course. Ricardo tried to hide his disappointment. Thank you for the cider. She nodded and turned to leave, then stopped. Are you coming to the Christmas celebration? At the church on Sunday? I didn't think I'd be welcome, he admitted. You are, she said simply. 7 o'clock. With that, she walked away, leaving Ricardo standing on the porch with a thermos of cider and the first real hope he'd felt in weeks. Sunday arrived, cold and clear, stars filling the night sky above the small white church in the center of town. Ricardo arrived early, nervously adjusting his tie as he entered the warmly lit building. People greeted him with surprising warmth, many stopping to talk about the farmhouse project or to thank him for the new jobs at the processing facility. He scanned the crowd for Lorena, but didn't see her. As the celebration began, with carols, and readings, Ricardo found himself genuinely enjoying the sense of community. These people who had initially distrusted him after learning of his deception were now accepting him as one of their own. It was a feeling he'd never experienced in the city, despite all his success. After the service, everyone gathered in the church hall for refreshments. Ricardo was speaking with Frank when he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Lorena, standing there, beautiful in a simple red dress. "You came," she said. "You invited me," he replied. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Outside?" Ricardo nodded, his heart racing as he followed her out onto the church steps. The night was cold but clear, the moon casting silver light over the town square. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Lorena began. "About trust, about forgiveness, about second chances." Ricardo waited, afraid to hope too much. "When Brian lied to me, it was because he was hiding his real life, his wife, his children. He was pretending to be someone he wasn't." She looked up at Ricardo. "But with you it was different, wasn't it?" "How so?" he asked. "You were pretending to be someone with less, not more. You weren't trying to impress me with false status or wealth. If anything, you were hiding advantages, not flaws." Ricardo hadn't thought of it that way. "I suppose that's true, but a lie is still a lie." "Yes," she acknowledged, "and it hurt just as much. But your reasons were different, and what you've done since then has been different too." She took a step closer to him. "Harold thinks I should forgive you." "And what do you think?" Ricardo asked softly. "I think—" She paused, searching his face. "I think the man I was falling for, Rico the caretaker, is actually standing right in front of me. He just has a different name and a bigger bank account than I thought." Ricardo's heart leaped. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. The feelings, the connection between us, that was all real." Lorena nodded. "I believe you now. What changed your mind?" "Watching you," she said simply. "The way you've thrown yourself into saving the farm, into helping the community. The Ricardo Patterson I imagined would never have gotten his hands dirty alongside construction workers, or sat for hours listening to the concerns of ordinary people." She reached up, adjusting his slightly crooked tie. "The man who did those things? That's the man I was falling for. I just didn't know his real name." Ricardo caught her hand gently. "So what happens now?" "Now," Lorena said, "we start over. Honestly this time. No secrets, no pretending." "I'd like that," Ricardo said, his voice thick with emotion. "So would I." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Hello, I'm Lorena Miller. I run the market in town and I make the best apple pies in the county." Ricardo smiled back, playing along. "Nice to meet you, Lorena. I'm Ricardo Patterson. I own the farm outside town, and I'm terrible at making bread, but I'd like to learn if you'd teach me." "I think that could be arranged," she said softly. Around them snow began to fall, gentle flakes drifting down to dust their shoulders and hair. Ricardo reached up, brushing a snowflake from Lorena's cheek. "May I?" he asked. She nodded, and he leaned down, kissing her softly. Her lips were warm, against his, and she tasted faintly of peppermint and promise. When they parted, she looked up at him with clear eyes. "No more lies, no more hiding." "No more lies," he agreed. "What you see is who I am." "And what I see," she said, reaching up to touch his face, "is the man I love." Ricardo felt his heart overflow with joy. "I love you too. I have since the first day you gave me bread and an apple, just because that's what neighbors do." She laughed, the sound bright in the winter night. "And we are definitely neighbors now." Hand in hand, they walked back into the church hall, where Harold watched them with knowing eyes, and the community that had brought them together celebrated not just Christmas, but the power of truth, forgiveness, and new beginnings. 3 months later, as the first signs of spring emerged across the fields of Patterson Farm, the farmhouse transformation was complete. The grand opening drew people from all over the county. The community center already had classes scheduled for months ahead. The medical clinic had signed up doctors eager to help, and the grounds were being prepared for the first farmers' market of the season. Ricardo stood on the porch watching as people toured the facility, their faces bright with appreciation and excitement. Frank joined him, nodding in approval. You did good, boss, the foreman said. Really good. We all did, Ricardo corrected him. This was a community effort. Frank chuckled. You're not a city boy anymore, that's for sure. Inside, Lorena was showing a group of women the new kitchen, designed for cooking classes and community meals. She caught Ricardo's eye through the window and smiled, that special smile that was just for him. Later, as the crowd thinned and the sun began to set, Ricardo and Lorena walked hand in hand through the orchard where the first buds were forming. On the apple trees. I got a call from the company today, Ricardo said. The board approved my reduced role. I'll only need to go to the city once a month for meetings. That's wonderful, Lorena said. Though I have to admit, I was getting used to the idea of dating a long-distance CEO. Ricardo stopped, turning to face her. I'm exactly where I want to be, with the person I want to be with. Even in this little town, after all the excitement of city life? Especially in this little town, he assured her. I found something here I never had there. Belonging, purpose, love. She rose on tiptoes to kiss him. Who would have thought? The big city millionaire and the small town shopkeeper. Stranger things have happened, he murmured against her lips. Like what? Like a man finding his true self by pretending to be someone else. Ricardo smiled, taking off his hat, the same wide-brimmed hat he'd worn on his first day in Meadow Creek. The truth was, under the hat all along. I just needed you to help me see it. Lorena took the hat from him, placing it on her own head with a playful smile. And now I see you, the real you, and I like what I see. As the sun set over Patterson Farm, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Ricardo knew with absolute certainty that he had found his home, not in a place but in a person. In Lorena's honest eyes, in her forgiving heart, in the simple truth of their love. Some journeys take you far away, only to lead you right back where you belong. Some truths hide in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. And sometimes the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be earned through honesty, through effort, and through love. For Ricardo and Lorena, standing amid the awakening orchard as spring breathed new life into the land, the journey was just beginning. But now they would walk it together, with no lies between them, no masks, and no pretending. Just truth, trust, and the promise of tomorrow. The end.